Okay, so you got yourself an old radio. Doesn't have to be a CB. It can be anything electronic if it's old. There's a chance that it has nasty glue. So this radio was sent in to be restored, but its main problem is it does not have any transmit. I have not even plugged it in yet. The first thing I do before I get anything, now granted, I tear my brand new stuff apart before I plug it in, but especially anything old, a few things you want to do first. Take the covers off of it, top and bottom. Make sure it doesn't look like there's any hokey wiring in there. Somebody's been in there with a pair of fence pliers, trying to do repairs to a radio. Bare wires can be exposed, especially if it was shipped to you. A lot of people use black tape when they do, wire splices. Black tape dries out, the adhesive. The tape can fall off. That wire can now be shorted against something. So it's always a good idea to take the covers off and just give it a quick once-over. Just eyeball it. Even if you don't understand electronics, you can still look at it. If you take the covers off and you give it the sniff test, if something smells burnt, don't plug it in. There's probably already a problem. You can, look over the radio or whatever it is and see if you see any obvious signs of damage, burned up wiring or a component. And then, if you find something, if you feel confident replacing it yourself, have at it. If not, send it to a repair person. Another thing you always want to check, and this is probably the most important one, the fuse. I see so many radios. There'll be a problem in the radio, and I don't know what the hell goes through people's heads. They figure, well, if it's supposed to have a 3 amp fuse and it blows, well, it must need a bigger fuse. No, if it's supposed to have a 3 amp fuse and it blows, it's blowing for a reason. There's a problem, and the fuse is protecting the equipment. I don't have enough fingers and toes to count the amount of radios like this that should have a fairly low current fuse, and you'll pull the fuse holder out and it's got a 15 or a 20 amp fuse in it. By the time a 15 or 20 amp fuse blows in something like this, it's probably caught on fire by then. I mean, that's just way, way, way too much power to be going through something like this. So check the fuse. If it's the wrong fuse, get the proper size fuse and put it in before you turn it on. That way, if there is a problem, the fuse will blow, protecting your radio or television or whatever it might be from bursting into flames. Now, something like this. This was sent in, like I say, it's sent in for a full restoration. The radio is actually in very nice physical condition. The covers are nice. I mean, even the bottom cover. A lot of times you'll see a lot of oxidation on that. The bottom cover on this thing's really nice. Just a few little tiny spots of oxidation, but otherwise, really nice condition. It does have a broken switch. Now, the switch does work. The channel 9, or, emergency channel button, the little shaft is broken off of it, and the button's missing, so I do need to replace that, so I'll be sticking a new one of those in. But before I plugged this in, the first thing I did, follow my own rules. I checked the fuse. Fuse is fine. Now, obviously, if the fuse was blown, the radio wouldn't turn on at all. But that's still, I always want to check that to make sure it has a proper rated fuse. Next thing I did, give it a good once-over. Honestly, this radio doesn't look like... I'm not going to say anything, because actually there is one resistor on the power supply board that's obviously been replaced. You can just tell by looking at the color of it. It's not an original. Not uncommon, that one does get hot on these boards. But everything looks fine otherwise. So it looks like it may have had one resistor replaced. Other than that, it looks 100% stock. No modifications, nobody screwdrivered this thing. All of the cores, that would have come from the factory with wax in them still have wax in them. So, really good signs when it comes to a CB radio, because CB radios are known for, having, tons of modifications done to them. But there is one thing I noticed. Lots of that corrosive glue. You'll often hear me talking about that stuff. And I think that's probably what's wrong with this. It has corroded the lead off of something. So the first thing I did was I played dentist for about a half hour or more. Get out my dental picks, some tweezers, little screwdrivers, all kinds of scrapers and scratchers, and I removed all of that. So that is what used to be on the top side of this radio. This is all that glue. It gets hard. When it starts to get dark brown like that, it becomes conductive, and the more of a problem is it becomes corrosive. Now, luckily, there was, because it's not uncommon on this chassis, any radios like this from Uniden, to see that glue right here. They'll pour it down around this capacitor, but it oozes over and touches the leads of the PLL. Don't be surprised if this back left pin, or maybe 2 or 3 of them, are just corroded off. They're just gone. There's nothing there anymore. They'll be eaten away. Same thing with the VCO block here. They pour it down to hold it in place so it doesn't move, though as rigid as these things are, I don't know why it needed any glue, but they have both corners glued. It's not uncommon for that glue. It oozes down, gets all over the pins on either end, and again, can eat the terminals off of the VCO block. In the case of this radio, that hadn't happened. The glue never even touched the PLL chip, and the glue that was applied to the VCO block was only at the top edges. So I've already cleaned all the glue out. Back in the final, I mean, I can go through, it's normally on this crystal, a couple diodes here, anything with a ferrite bead. So a lot of things will have these little ferrite beads on them. All of those are going to have it on. You'll find a couple capacitors back here with ferrite beads. There's a couple other places, blobs of it down here, usually here, all over in the final section here. A little toroid transformer here is going to have it on. Clean all that stuff off. And any of your big capacitors, like this one and the one over here on the power supply board, they're always going to have a bunch of it on there too. And you can see it's been doing its damage. If I can get the camera down close enough to where you can actually see it. But the top of this capacitor, because this entire area was saturated with that stuff. Like I say, luckily it never made it the whole way down. But the top of that aluminum can of that capacitor, it's just white dust. It's corroded or oxidized that aluminum so much, there's really not much left to even that can. Now, as far as the problem goes, and this comes from experience, because worked on a lot of these with this problem because of the glue. This crystal's bad. I cleaned the glue off, from the entire radio, and I noticed the crystal just seems to move around too much. So I'm thinking, because I can wiggle it back and forth, front to back, and there's a terminal here and here. I shouldn't be able to wiggle it. I should be able to wiggle it this way, but it shouldn't wiggle this direction. So I'm pretty confident the rear terminal's corroded off of that. So let's find out. Now, like I say, this one looks pretty much unmodified. Actually, before I go any farther, let me vacuum up all this crud off of my bench. Okay, much better. One thing I can't stand is a mess. But, virgin looking board. Look at that. No modifications in the PLL area. Absolutely nothing. Clarifier still locked. There's no hot wire running over here to the clarifier. So, yeah, it's pretty much been untouched other than that one resistor over here that was replaced. I really don't see anything that looks like it's ever been soldered on other than the factory soldering, but on the main board. So, good signs, not a lot of shit to unscrew up. So, let's just pop that crystal out. And like I say, I hadn't even turned it on to verify. But if the customer, I know he knows about radios. This camera's going to get in my way. I've got to swing it back a little bit here. I can get my head in here real quick and find leads for this capacitor. That's why you never see me working on camera, because the camera is always in the way. So that should be those two right there. Oh, I get my head back around here. Where in the hell was I? And I done lost him again. Dagnabbit. Where the hell is that variable trimmer cap? Transformer, trimmer cap, crystal. Okay, right there. So. And yep, Just as I suspected. There's no terminal. The glue got underneath of it. You can see it's all oxidized there, but that's the problem is the glue, when it was fresh, when it was poured on there, it oozes underneath the crystals. That's why I frequently tell people, if you have an old radio like this, and honestly, it doesn't have to be that old, because it, depending on the moisture and temperature conditions, it sometimes doesn't necessarily take, decades for that glue to start to decompose and become corrosive. So, really important, if your radio has that crap in there, get it out before it does damage. Because it's going to be a lot cheaper, which if you do it yourself, it's not going to cost you anything, to get in there, take the glue out before stuff like this starts to happen. I've seen radios where it'll need 1, 2, or 3 crystals, the VCO block, and the PLL chip. It gets expensive, and that's not talking about any other repairs. You've already had to replace a couple crystals and other components. It starts to add up money-wise. So if you got an old radio, get that glue out of there. That's why. Terminal's just gone, So important to make sure you get that stuff out of there. So I had suspected that was the problem. Just make sure I get all the residue out from underneath there, because I don't want it corroding the replacement crystal. And I already have a new one here. So we'll get this little guy stuck in there. And I can't see the hole. Camera's in the way. Again, why I never do repairs on... Actually, the terminal is still stuck in the hole. That's why I can't get the lead in. The piece of terminal is still stuck in there. It looks like there's maybe a little chunk of it still in there. Majority of it's out. Make sure I get that hole reamed out really good. There we go. Now it should fall into place. Hey, look at that. Goes in much better when there's not a broken off or corroded off terminal still in the hole. Okay, a bit of solder. And now we can power it up and see if it transmits. Should receive. Customer said it received fine. So, no diagnostic equipment at all, other than your senses. You may be able to fix your radio. It could be as simple as this. You may not need to send it to a repair tech. You've got a soldering iron and, some common sense and, like I say, if you've got a component like this that's narrow and wide, and it has 2 terminals that are spaced kind of far apart, and you can wiggle it, it will normally be able to wiggle it this way, but you should not be able to rock it back and forth this way because there's a terminal on either end. This one I could obviously rock it back and forth this direction, so there's obviously a problem there, after I got the glue off. So let's get her powered up here. Isolation transformer on. Okay. The volume control, we are going to need a speaker, because this does not have an internal speaker. And this should be, 5-pin adapter out here. Yeah, I probably could have been a little bit more prepared. Had a mic adapter ready. Oh, for Pete's sakes, where's number 5 at? There it is. Okay. Get a microphone plugged in here. Turn on the communications test set here. And let's just see. Oh, we're in AM. Aha! Look at that. 3.34 watts. Okay, mic gain, RF gain up. Controls are really dirty. Yeah, way out of alignment. Way out of alignment. I can tell because right now it's putting out 27.185 at 1 microvolt, which I should definitely be able to hear, and I can just barely start to hear it when I have the clarifier at full right-hand lock. So if we increase power, yeah, so there's 10 microvolts. So yep, out of alignment. And it could have bad caps too, because remember, I have not done anything other than remove the glue and now replace this crystal, but that's all it took. You know, it definitely needs an alignment, but as far as the failure in this thing, I needed absolutely no diagnostic tools whatsoever other than my senses. So, you know, actually let me try sideband. I've got transmit here, so I actually look up there. So yep, it's doing 11.9 watts on sideband. So yep, that fixed it. That's all it was, just a bad crystal. Let's just see how sensitivity is on sideband. Frequency. Lower sideband. Still not bad. Still a good readable tone. A half microvolt. Yep, my that's not a problem with the radio. The communications test said I had the power strip turned off. So actually you hear that's actually the frequency jittering. And to leave it on long enough, you'll hear it rather quickly here. That jittering will get closer and slower because the crystal oven, you know, with my power strip turned off right there, the crystal oven wasn't turned on inside. And until the PLL locks inside of that, you're going to hear that jitter because that's what it's trying to do. It's trying to lock on frequency. But, yep, so radio works fine. So there you go. This is just going to be a video just on that. I'll probably do a separate video on the entire radio, the rest of the restoration on this. But yeah, so as far as, like I say, a lot of problems can be fixed with no diagnostic tools, no meters, no oscilloscopes, no spectrum analyzers, no RF power meters, frequency counters. You don't need a lot of that. Sometimes it's just as simple as a little bit of common sense. If you know the glue's corrosive, anything that it has touched, it's a possibility there's a lead corroded off of it. So, it could be something as simple as that. Now, granted, your average person probably isn't going to have a 7.8 megahertz crystal laying around like I do. You repair radios for a living, so I've got a drawer full of them. But, once you know what the problem is, you could then order one and still fix it yourself. You wouldn't have to send the radio out to anybody. Or at the least, if you still need to maybe send it out to get a proper transceiver alignment done on it, you can still do some of the repairs yourself, and you can save yourself that much money. I know some people other repair guys probably cringe when they hear me say that about customers fixing the radios themselves. Hey, I have no problem with that. I've got guys that recap their radios. I've told them, hey, if you feel confident, you can replace the electrolytic capacitors yourself, have at it. Doesn't bother me at all. I'll check behind their work, make sure. Sometimes I might have to straighten out a few solder connections or something, but they saved theirself, that much money because they did the work themselves. So don't be afraid to, just buy a cheap desoldering iron and a soldering iron, roll of solder, and hell, have at it. Recap your radio, do some minor repairs like this. You might be able to save yourself a shitload of money. Then you can, if it has other problems that need diagnostics, then you can send it to the repair tech. They can diagnose maybe the more advanced problems, do the alignment for it. But in the end, you save yourself some money, and then you can buy another radio. Hint, hint. So I hope that helps somebody out. Like I said, just remember, your senses, probably your most valuable diagnostic tool. And a lot of times they can find problems with no other tools.